It feels like a propaganda-laden, dog-whistle-filled attempt to appease not only Trump, but his allies and his base of supporters, many of whom are likely the same people who keep Facebook alive by sharing AI-generated images of Jesus. But taken in context of the other actions Zuckerberg has taken recently, it's part of a larger trend indicative of Zuckerberg's rightward radicalization in recent years, fueled by his own personal relationships as well as, predictably, ire at the government for making him not do bad things, which all billionaires and heads of big businesses invariably eventually get to. The speed at which they realize they hate the government just varies, but they all eventually get to a point of being completely worn out from trying to dodge the feds. As anyone who's watched The Sopranos or any other mafia movie could probably understand, dodging the law is exhausting. The only difference between big business and the mafia is that, at least in theory, the big businesses start out legitimate, and it's only after they've gotten so large they become untouchable that the law no longer applies to them, or at least they think it shouldn't. The only difference is that Tony Soprano, despite being a terrible person, still seems like someone I could probably get a beer with, whereas Mark Zuckerberg seems like he would stare unblinkingly at anyone who attempted small talk with him. Anyway, the rightward radicalization of Mark Zuckerberg in 3 acts. Act 1, the 2016 election. According to reporting from the New York Times, the Zuck didn't take too kindly to coming under heightened government scrutiny after it was revealed that Facebook was used by foreign governments to influence the election, and the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal wherein people's data was used without their consent to try to influence their votes. According to the New York Times, after enormous public pressure, quote, the company spent the next 8 years investing billions of dollars, thousands of people, and devoting enormous technological resources to fixing content moderation issues. But then, no one gave Mark the accolades he felt he deserved for doing all the hard, thankless work of trying to make sure the company he created didn't single-handedly upend US democracy. Notably, he found that the investment was creating diminishing returns, because again, it's always about the bottom line. And ego, but mostly the bottom line. Act 2, making new friends. As someone who clearly probably struggles to make connections with humanoids, Mark Zuckerberg was easily pulled rightwards when he found people that would tolerate him in the wonderful world of MMA, a testosterone-fueled, often misogynistic and right-leaning environment where, according to the New York Times, the Zuck formed a close connection with Dana White, the head of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, friend of Donald Trump, and now a newly named future member of the board of Meta. Zuck and White are so close that back in 2023, when Elon Musk publicly challenged Zuckerberg to a cage match on Twitter, Zuck texted Dana White directly and asked him if Elon was serious about wanting to fight him. White then acted as a liaison between the two billionaires in an attempt to actually organize a literal cage match, which, this is why men shouldn't be allowed to run things. What a stupid, ego-driven load of baloney. Zuckerberg's affiliation with White and the world of ultimate fighting have continued to the point that Zuck was like, get this man on the board of directors. Act 3, COVID. In a letter to Congress last year, the Zuck made clear that he was annoyed about the Biden administration putting pressure on him to regulate COVID-related misinformation on his platforms, saying that he should have pushed back more against the administration's requests. COVID also saw a major boom in Zuck's fortune and the growth of the company, followed by massive tech layoffs that I'm sure made the idea of cutting back on moderation more appealing. The less they moderate, the less money they have to spend on the moderation. Indeed, in 2022, they began paring back moderation across the platforms, according to the New York Times. And it wasn't just COVID that had the government breathing down Zuckerberg's neck. There was also the time in 2019 when Facebook was sued by the Department of Housing and Urban Development for allowing racially discriminatory housing ads to run on its platform in clear and blatant violation of the Fair Housing Act. Then there was the tax evasion lawsuit. Oh, and also the FTC filed a major lawsuit in 2020 against Meta for unfair trade practices, also known as anti-competitive monopolistic behavior. The lawsuit, headed by the chair of the FTC and channel favorite 𝗓𝗓 Khan, is seeking to force Meta to sell some of its subsidiaries. That lawsuit is still ongoing and likely another motivator behind Zuck's quick move to bend the knee to Trump. Trump has announced he will be replacing 𝗓𝗓 Khan with current FTC Commissioner Andrew Ferguson, which likely means that the commission will operate with a lighter touch when it comes to antitrust enforcement, according to reporting from Time. More lenient FTC leadership, along with a sympathetic president in the White House, could mean that antitrust lawsuit against Meta goes away entirely, or at the very least ends in barely a slap on the wrist, if that. And I've never seen the books over at Meta, but I can venture a guess that even if advertisers run in the opposite direction of Meta, the same way they have with X, once it too becomes a swirling cesspool of right-wing bigotry, it is still better for Meta's bottom line for it to be allowed to continue monopolizing any and all competition. That and the cost savings of no longer having to moderate anything, combined with the Zuck's personal right turn and hatred of government regulations meddling in his business and forcing him not to do illegal things, is likely barely enough to push him ever write words and more willing to do what it takes to win favor with Trump. And it seems to be working. Zuck was invited to dine at Mar-a-Lago recently. Meta gave $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund. Fun fact, inauguration funds are fun ways to get around campaign finance laws. He also promoted Joel Kaplan to the most senior policy role at Meta. Kaplan has deep ties to the Republican Party and recently appeared on Fox and Friends to support the new Meta policy, with Trump responding that he found Kaplan's appearance very impressive and that Meta had come a long way. According to reporting from Semaphore, Joel Kaplan is a longtime Republican who once served as White House Deputy Chief of Staff under George W. Bush and has strongly criticized Meta's censoring, complaining internally that it disproportionately discriminates against right-leaning voices. Kaplan replaced the former head of policy and lobbying at Meta, Nick Clegg, who, prior to working for Meta, used to run the UK's Liberal Democrats Party. Switching from that guy to a guy with deep Republican ties 2 weeks before Trump's inauguration was clearly no accident, and part of a larger scheme to appease Trump, a man who once threatened to jail Mark Zuckerberg for his censorship activities.